Hello, everybody, and welcome to Write Your Damn Book, the podcast, episode 1, Why Everyone Should Write a Book. Even you, especially you. Before getting into that, I want to tell you why I'm so passionate about this idea. It starts with my story. Once upon a time, I was a straight, young, frustrated white male living a very, very difficult life. All jokes aside, I've been very fortunate in my life. I went to a good school, I had a good major, etc., but I didn't want the standard path of work for Bank A, Bank B, or Bank D. Bank C didn't give me an offer. So I stumbled into this path of being a sports writer just because I loved sports. Actually didn't love writing, funny enough, but I wanted to be around sports, and I realized that was an easy way to do that in college. So I wrote for the school paper, covered tennis, softball, stuff like that. Went up with an internship at this company called Sports Grid. They offered me a job after school, not like after school, like an after school program, but after I had graduated school. I got to work on this podcast thing. I'm trying my best here. Bear with me. So I got a job actually a bit before I graduated, started working remotely. But here's the kicker. The salary for that job, which their offices were based in New York City, for a full-time job, $20,000 per year. And quick aside there, one of my friends had this awesome joke when he'd be at a family dinner when they were out to eat and the check would come. You know, the older, more successful people would reach for the check, and my buddy drove a bus at the time, and he would freak out, grab the check, and go, guys, I got this. And I'm like, no, we're older, we make more money, blah, 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 blah. He's like, guys, you don't understand. I make $20,000 per year. I got this. And when I got this job after college, I could totally relate. So long story short, I lived with my parents in the suburbs because obviously I couldn't afford to live in New York City. It was no big deal. You know, I'm very lucky that my mom cooked for me and I was actually able to save money despite making virtually nothing, and it was fine. But did that for about 6 months and quickly grew tired of living at home as a 21-year-old single man. Naturally, I asked for a raise. And when you're making $20,000 and doing decent work or just not fucking up, you deserve a raise. So I asked for a raise to $35,000 a year, which I suppose was almost a 100% increase, but also still $35,000. If I make $35,000 a year in New York City, I can make it work. I can sleep in a toilet or a bathtub or a closet inside of a closet or something like that. I'll make it work. I won't be living in luxury, but I think I can deal with it. I think that was a pretty reasonable request. So I made a little proposal, sent it to the head honcho, who's like owned some media company. He owned our site as a part of a portfolio. Honestly, I don't really think I'd ever read anything I'd written, but I mean, this guy gets it. He gets that if this is something he's serious about and they had just purchased the site, you need good writers, you need to pay them enough to keep them long term. And if you can get a good writer for 35 grand, friggin' steal. Not to toot my own horn, but anyone who can speak fluent English is probably worth $35,000 a year. And my English is goodly. So I was expecting a yes, to be honest, and he actually did give me a yes. So I'm walking down the street after having lunch one day. I was in the office. I would go in about once a week. And walking down, I think, 14th Street. It's a beautiful day. Just wearing a light sweatshirt. I think it was spring. And I get this call from the guy. I won't say his name, but, hey, Matt, read your proposal. Oh, hey, thanks, man. My voice is getting really high because I'm nervous, and I hope you say yes. We agree. You totally deserve a raise. You're doing great work. And I just sigh relief. Thank you. This guy gets it. I knew he would get it. Anyone with half a brain gets this. $20,000 is not sustainable. I'm working my ass off. I am valuable. I'm worth 35 grand. Anyone is. And then he goes, we're going to give you your raise to $28,000. And I just remember this hybrid feeling of rage and laughter at the same time. And I just mute my phone as an instinct because I felt something erupting inside of me. And I put my phone on mute and I erupted in laughter in the middle of the street. And everyone was probably staring at me. Actually, they probably weren't because this is New York and people do shit like that. But yeah, I just couldn't believe that he had the audacity to tell me that. And he went on this whole spiel about how valuable I was and how amazing my work was. Of course, didn't actually reference anything I had written, but just, you're amazing and you're totally worth this. And, eventually maybe we'll get you what you asked for, blah, 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 blah. And all I'm hearing is just, he doesn't know who I am. He sees me as a cog in a wheel, a number, and a very small, meaningless number. So yeah, I basically just realized at that point, especially with writing, and can you make decent money writing, working for someone else? Yeah, it's possible. People do it, but just for me in the situation I was in, I was like, this is not sustainable. I need to do something different. I'd always had a bit of an entrepreneurial streak. I had read, the 4-Hour Work Week in college, and I was seduced by the idea of passive income, work on things you're passionate about, travel the world, help people make tons of money, etc., etc., etc. So that kind of just stuck back in my mind. In that moment, I realized I can't work for someone else. And I'm sure some of you listening had a similar experience where maybe logically, yes, I could have done something different, but just, it was the last straw. I had already been strongly considering working for myself, and this was just like, fuck this. I am working for myself. I'm going to find a way to make it work. And like many of you, once you reach that point, I reached that point, but then I was like, wait, but how the hell did I do that? So basically, I didn't know what to do. I had no great business ideas. I'd write down 100 business ideas a month, and they'd all be mediocre, blended in nonsense. I never actually worked on any of them. I'd write a blog post or write a little fake business plan or test something or post in a Facebook group. I never did anything with it. No matter how good the advice is in books like The 4-Hour Work Week, when you're 21 years old and feel like you don't have that much going for you, it's just hard. You don't know what to do. They give you the tactics, but you don't know what to do for you. What's my idea? Yeah, you could have these 100 ideas other people did, but what's my idea? How am I going to stand out? How am I going to make this work? I don't have a budget. I don't have an audience. I have these vague ideas. I'm going to help people work out or something. Like, everyone does that. What are you talking about? So when I didn't know what to do, I just decided that teaching English was a good stopgap. I'd done a bunch of research. I studied abroad in college. So I'm like, fuck it. I'm quitting my job, moving to Prague and teaching English. And I'll just kind of figure out this online business thing in the background. So got to Prague, taught for a bit, again, just wrote down business ideas every day and never executed on them. And I don't know when I wish I remembered the moment, but when I was writing for Sports Grid, I kind of carved this little niche about writing about sports gambling because it wasn't really talked about that much. It was illegal at the time. Illegal. I don't know if you can hear me. I don't enunciate very well. Enunciate. Sorry, again, bear with me here. So I carved out this little niche writing about sports gambling. And I would write a weekly football column, football picks, and it got 15 to 20,000 hits per week. It's pretty damn good. And people would tweet at me and occasionally email me asking for advice and stuff like that. And I had a lot of time on my hands in Prague. I was teaching part-time. I actually wound up quitting after a couple months once the story I'm about to tell you occurred. And I just had a lot of time. It's like, what do I do with myself? I didn't have a lot of friends. We'd go out a couple times a week, but I didn't have a lot of money. Prague is super cheap, but wasn't balling out. I just needed shit to do. So I just had so much more to say about sports betting, but I didn't work for Sports Grid anymore. I just wrote that column once a week as a kind of freelance thing. So this idea had been kicking around in my head for months. I've got all this time on my hands, and I'm like, fuck it. I need to at least try writing this book on sports betting. It just needs to happen. And I started to take very, very small steps in that direction. And now, luckily, somehow, I guess it was just out of laziness, I was smart enough to realize that I shouldn't just put my head down for weeks, months, years, writing this book that nobody might read. So I had these, 15,000-ish people reading my column every week. And instead of actually writing the book, all I did was, at the top of my column, which was just a bunch of pics, just this little excerpt. I can send it to you guys if you want. Shoot me an email if you're curious exactly what I wrote. But it was basically, if you're interested in learning, a little more about how I make these picks and some principles about sports betting, something stupid like that, shoot me an email with the subject line book. to this email. I don't even think I mentioned I was writing a book. I think I just said subject line book. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know copywriting at the time. It was very poorly written. And I got in 2 weeks, so I did it for 2 weeks, and I believe I got 46 emails. Nothing crazy, and the conversion rate was actually probably quite bad. But I got some emails, and people seemed to just intuit that when I said subject line book, I meant I was writing a book. So people are interested. They didn't pay me any money. They're interested. And I decided to kind of just let the book emerge from my engagement with these people. So I started by writing the 10 commandments of sports betting. Again, kind of corny. It wasn't that great, but it was useful for my audience. It was helpful. I basically talked about 10 mistakes I had made, because quick backstory of why I got obsessed with sports betting. My grandma gave me a $100 gift when I was in college, told me to not spend it on something boring. Bless her. Thank you, Grandma. I owe you one. And I mean, I didn't really buy anything in college. I didn't need clothes. I was lucky enough to have a couple video games. I had enough money for fast food and beer and plastic bottle vodka. What else does a 20-year-old kid need? So I'd wanted to bet on sports pretty much my whole life, but fortunately I was smart enough to know how stupid that was, especially as a kid with no disposable income. So I never did it. Not an idiot. My parents would have killed me if I took money out of their wallet or something. I don't know. So I finally had this $100. Fuck it. I'm going to bet on sports. Expected to lose it in a week or two, maybe a month if I'm lucky. And got lucky at the beginning. And then I, turned that $100 into $500. Then all of a sudden it was 800 and 1,000. And once I hit 1,000, I was like, this is real money. Read a couple books about sports betting, started reading about the psychology of investing and gambling and risk and stuff like that, advanced stats, sabermetrics, blah, yada, yada, yada. And I turned that $100 into almost 10,000, which is a lot of money for anyone. And it's a shit ton of money for someone who at the time wasn't working and who after college got a job for $20,000 a year. And I'm sitting there with my $20,000 a year salary and $10,000 in my sports betting account. It was absurd. And I say this not to brag. I say this to tell you that it took me 2 years, I think about 2 years to make the almost 10 grand. It's like 9,300 something or six, I don't know. And then it took me, I believe 2 weeks or maybe 2 months to lose it all. Literally lost every cent. I had taken out a little bit of money, I think about $1,000 early on in my career, but I lost it all. My balance was at zero, and that's a story for another time. I made a bunch of stupid decisions, had some bad luck, but lost it all. And I figured the idea for this book was not the typical, here's how to get rich sports betting because I'm so amazing and I'm an expert on the internet, but rather the opposite, because I knew a lot of people were struggling and losing money that they couldn't afford to lose. Here's how to go from intelligent fan losing money to risk-averse, intelligent gambler, who has this cheap hobby he can enjoy. You lose a bit of money, it's fun. Your wife doesn't want to kill you, and your bookie isn't chopping your kneecaps off, or whatever it is that they do. So I wrote this book. Basically just obsessively researched self-publishing, realized it's not that difficult to do. I mean, the difficult part is making the book good. The logistics of publishing are actually quite easy, which I will explain another time. But did it. It actually only took me, I believe, 6 weeks because I had a lot of time on my hands and I pretty much spent all day, every day writing and editing and formatting and all that stuff and wrote this book. So after 6 weeks, I have this book, got a cover designed for $5 on Fiverr. Actually looks pretty decent. Quick tip if you don't have money to invest in a cover designer, and I recommend most people do if you can, but if you're like me at the time, had no money, go on Fiverr or go on Canva and design it yourself and just do something really, 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 really simple. Don't try to be fancy. So you can look up Smart Sports Betting, that's my book, and it's literally just a picture of a football. That's it. So I wound up with this book. It's on Amazon, available in paperback, and it was good enough. It's pretty good. It wasn't mind-blowing. Didn't hire an editor, didn't hire a designer, but it was decent, and the content was useful, and I had been interacting with my small email list of 46 people, kind of testing ideas, asking them what they wanted included. I knew I had something okay, but I wasn't expecting to get rich. I had a pretty good idea of the potential in self-publishing. Most people don't do well. So I launch it, tell my 46-person email list about it. I think I had like 850 followers on Twitter at the time. I did something I wouldn't necessarily recommend, but I DM'd almost everyone on the list, probably like 400 people, because there were certain people that you could tell wouldn't buy it. They weren't sports fans. Messaged these 400 people. I think out of those 400, maybe 5 or 10 bought it. Very low conversion rate as well. It was probably kind of obnoxious in retrospect, but I was trying things out. So I wasn't expecting much. And actually, funny enough, right after I published it, I went on a trip to Croatia, to Dubrovnik and Split with my buddy Amin. Shout out Amin, love you. We were staying at a hostel. I have still no money at this point. And so I sent the first email to my list telling them that I launched this book. And when I say list, if you guys know anything about email marketing, you know anyone with a clue uses some service, ConvertKit, Constant Contact to MailChimp, whatever. I didn't know this at the time. I also probably couldn't have afforded any of those. I think MailChimp's actually free, but I was literally manually copying and pasting in the CC to my email list. So sent this email, about to go out for a night on the town in Dubrovnik, and I get this email on my phone, and I just see goddamn douchebag. And I was like, goddamn douchebag. I just did this is like biggest accomplishment of my life, and I'm giving these people a chance to buy it, and I offered them a discount, and someone's calling me a goddamn douchebag. So open it up, walk away from me, and for a bit, I'm like, fuck, what did I do? Open it up, and it turns out he was upset because I didn't know the difference between CC and BCC. So everyone could see everyone's emails, which is probably illegal. I didn't do it on purpose. I didn't know what I was doing. And the guy freaked out. So I apologized. He was not that forgiving. Told me to lose his email. He's like, yeah, okay, whatever. He calmed down a little bit, but he was pretty upset with me, and whatever, I get it. Made a mistake. But this is where I thought the story would end. Like, I published this book. Maybe a couple people are going to read it, but I probably fucked a bunch of things up. I'm not going to make any real money. This is not going to lead to anything. So have a good trip. Fast forward to, I get my first royalty check. I think it was $200 or $300. Like, oh, okay. My rent in Prague at the time was actually $350 a month. So I can almost pay rent. Pretty cool. If this stays steady, I'm not exactly getting rich, but this is cool. Second month comes around. I don't do anything between the first and second months. I'm doing a little bit of freelance writing, looking at teaching jobs, just kind of dicking around, spending my little bit of savings. And then the second month's royalty check comes in, and it's $1,150.06. I'll never forget that number because it blew my fucking mind. This is actually real money. Maybe not full-time income, but that's kind of close to what I was making at Sports Grid. Not to mention, there's this tax exemption. You actually don't have to pay taxes on your first $100,000 in income if you live in Prague. Prague was about maybe 20% of the cost of New York City. Honestly, I'm probably making more money than I was making at Sports Grid, all things considered. And it just kind of blew my mind. So I got obsessed with self-publishing. And that's what took me to this point today. I spent the next 2 years just trying hard to get these sort of freelance/consulting jobs helping people out. And I got a couple. My first one was with this guy, Trevor Krause, who is now the author of Ticket Lists, subtitles like How Sneaking into the Super Bowl and Everywhere Else Almost Held My Life Together, I believe. Great book. Check it out. But I got paid shit. Trevor's an awesome dude, but he was my age at the time, didn't have a ton of money either, was actually wound up teaching English after me, followed a very similar life path. And it was just a lot of stuff like that. Then I happened into working for this company called Book in a Box, now called Scribe. They do sort of ghostwriting. It's a bit different, but kind of like high-end stuff. So I made, $50 to $60 an hour for that. That was getting closer to real money. I'm doing pretty well at this point, but not crushing it. But it was still this constant cycle of I either need Book in a Box to give me something where I'm a freelancer, a well-paid freelancer, but not crushing it, or I have to beg these people for peanuts. And I just couldn't break through that ceiling. I never had people coming to me. I didn't have a business. But I'd still been learning so much because I was working with people in Book in a Box and with Trevor and with a couple other people. I worked with this entrepreneur to turn his podcast into a book. Again, took like a dozen emails and just begging him basically without trying to sound too desperate. I got paid $5,000 for that, which was absurd for the amount of work I did. I did hundreds of hours of work. So this is where most people's self-publishing stories stop. And this is where I thought my self-publishing story would stop. I started, emailing people and reaching out and trying to help people do what I did, but I didn't realize that I had only scratched the surface of the potential of self-publishing and books in general. But I had a similar experience as I had had a few years earlier with the sports betting stuff where I'm learning so much. I have so much to say. I need to write a book about writing books. And of course, I was aware at how corny that sounds. And I didn't want it to just be some repeat that is already out there because there's a lot of shitty books out there. I've read them all, trust me. So I actually resisted for a while. And again, long story short, I just said, fuck it, I'm going to do it. I have nothing to lose. I basically followed the same exact process I had followed before. I posted in a Facebook group with my story about smart sports betting, included some, tips and things I learned, and basically asked people, would they want to hear more? And like with my smart sports betting thing, people loved it. I'll try to link to the post I made in my show notes so you can see what I did exactly. It got 100 likes or something. It did really well. So I took that as validation and decided to write this book on writing books. It's now out. It's called You Are an Author, So Write Your Book Already. It used to be called You Are an Author, So Write Your Fucking Book with an asterisk. But apparently you can't advertise if you have curse words in it. So that was unfortunate. This book was actually just a lot harder for me to write because I wanted to make sure it was original. I included a lot of quotes from other people, though. It was longer. It's about twice as long. It's like 220 pages. So it wound up taking me, I think, a little over 2 years. And so again, I was expecting a similar thing to happen. I'm writing about an in-demand topic. There's a little more existing competition than with the sports betting stuff, but not that much good. So I was expecting a similar result. Make, my $1,000 a month at the beginning. It'll probably taper off to a few hundred. It's not going to make a living off of it, but maybe build a little email list, try to turn that into a business, et cetera, et cetera. And that's not what happened. What happened was I did a little launch. I didn't do much marketing. I gave it away for free at the beginning. Got a bunch of free downloads, 1,000 or something. And then it just kind of fizzled. And I could check later what my exact revenue is, but it's not even worth checking because it's so little. Maybe $200 in 3.5 years versus the 14,000 or whatever I made with smart sports betting. So by those metrics, a complete and utter failure, an absolute catastrophic failure. However, what I didn't realize was the indirect benefit of writing a book like that. And I had an idea because I had a lot of cool opportunities come to me after writing Smart Sports Betting. I got an offer from an imprint of Simon and Schuster to do a traditionally published book, and I'll talk about that another time. But it turned out that working with the traditional publisher is kind of ridiculous, and quite frankly, I think it's a scam. But I'll talk about that another time. What wound up happening was two things. Number one, despite me only having a handful of readers every month, and I occasionally would do giveaways and partnered with people to give away books to email lists and stuff like that. Despite very low readership numbers, I still had people reaching out to me for advice on publishing. Actually gotten a Twitter message from this founder of this company. I don't know if I can mention it, but it was this company that I was actually obsessed with, this small startup in New York. It was so cool. And the founder reached out to me because he had found my book. I don't actually think he read my book, which is another, I hate to admit this, but the truth is that probably 80% of the benefit of you publishing a book is just the fact that you did it. And if it looks good, it certainly helps if it's good. And, you need good reviews, and you can't really get good reviews without paying people, or even that's really difficult because it's not allowed. It has to be good, but a lot of people will just reach out to you because it looks good. So this guy asked me for advice and wound up charging him $250 an hour for some consulting, and he was happy and it was great. And again, all of a sudden I'm making this like real money, right? I'm making 5 times what I made with Book in a Box and 100 times what I made with Trevor, actually probably more than that. Like shit, probably making about as much as my book has made in 3.5 years. And a bunch of similar things happened like that. Just random people reaching out, even though I wasn't doing a good job marketing my book. And I was still doing some cold emails and stuff at the time. And I stopped needing to sell myself so much because people would just see my book and assume I was an expert. And now, again, I did consider myself an expert. I did know I could help these people. I'm not claiming, you should be unethical about this. But the point is, having this book out there, especially if it's good, especially if it has good reviews, especially if you get some, media coverage and stuff like that, lets you charge more. It makes people trust you more. It just stops you from needing to do this frustrating selling yourself constantly, because it's just exhausting to email someone and be like, I want to help you, and they're like, oh yeah, can you? And you're like, I'm trying to help you, man. I'm not trying to rip you off. And I would offer people, money back guarantees, and like I said before, I would offer people really low rates that I probably shouldn't have offered, but it was just so hard to convince people. And even when it worked, it just took so long, and they wanted to get references and this and that. And all of a sudden, when I wrote a book, that just stopped. And I started getting people coming to me, and people trusted me. And fast forward a couple of years, I've built a little platform off of this. I built a little email list. I'm selling an online course. I charge people an average of $30,000 for ghostwriting. And, all of a sudden, just with the first 3 people that reached out to me, all of a sudden had a 6-figure business. And this was after first making 20 grand a year at Sports Grid, going up to 28, and then making slightly more than that, working part-time freelancing at Book in a Box and stuff like this. All of a sudden I'm making real money. It's not just making real money. I'm working with people that read my stuff, people who have the same mindset as me, people who are trying to do what I did, people I love working with. And it was just, it's been amazing. If you are struggling in any way getting attention online, even if you're doing well, but you aren't getting flooded with opportunities, or you think you could be charging a little more, or you think you should need to sell yourself less, a book could be the solution. To give people information that they want, to let them trust you, and to only sell the people that actually want you to sell them. So when you write a good book, it stands on its own. It's not a sales pitch. And if you look around at more businessy categories, if you go on Amazon, you'll see that if you read the reviews, people are like, this was one long sales pitch. And that is not what I'm telling you to do. The point is to cover a subject comprehensively, and then just to offer people the next step as a paid option. For example, you can write a book just based on my book, You Are an Author. I'm not going to lie to you about that. The book is not a sales pitch. The book is a comprehensive guide. However, it's a lot of fucking work. Also, I wrote it 2.5 years ago, and I've changed a lot of my opinions and added things on. But if you're like I was, you don't have any money to invest, just pick up my book. And then there's going to be some of you who see this 220-page book and be like, I just want some videos. I want a workbook to help me through it. I want coaching and accountability because I've tried to write a book before and I got stuck halfway through. Or I got stuck before I wrote the first page. Or I wasn't sure if my idea would be good and where do I test my idea by, yada, yada, yada. You get the point. And the funny thing is I didn't plan for any of this stuff. I started this second book 5 years ago. Started the first book, I guess, 6.5 years ago. I didn't have a plan for either of these beforehand. So I just stumbled into all this stuff. If I had planned early on to build a business around either smart sports betting or You Are an Author, they would be doing way, 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 way better, which is why I teach people to do things differently than I did. And the conclusion I've come to is that everyone should write a book. Everyone should have a book as the entryway to their expertise, as a way to introduce people to their story, their ideas, and how they can help. Because it's the perfect tool to get noticed and to build trust. And the currency of the internet is trust. So it's what you need, it's what you want, and it's what people want you to build. So if you have any interest in working with me, if you want me to give you personalized feedback on your ideas, on your business, on your potential business. It doesn't matter what stage in the process you're at. If you've written a word, if you've written 100,000 words, I offer a coaching program. And before we work together, I will give you a free strategy session where we can talk about anything you'd like. I'll give you as much feedback as we can get to, and basically we'll just decide if you're a good fit. And if you're not, that is totally fine too. I would still love to hear from you. I'd love to hear about your ideas and perhaps point you in the right direction. So if you're interested at all, I have a direct link to my calendar. I'm probably going to change this in either January or February of 2021, that is. But for now, you can just go to platypusbooks.com. So that's PLATYPUS books.com/call. And that is a direct link to my calendar. You'll see a little friendly picture of me, my calendar. It's possible in January or February or beyond that this will be closed. But for now, this is absolutely wide open. It's totally free, and I'd love to hear from you. So just visit platypusbooks.com/call. And hope to speak to you. Thank you very much for listening. I really appreciate your time, and stay in touch.